Hi, my name is Rob McLean. Thanks for joining us for Managing for Success webinar, Branding Beyond the Product Label. This is Marketing and Communications for Ontario Food Processors. So for the first slide you can see here, a quote that I've always liked, talking about marketing and communications, that marketing is merely a civilized form of warfare in which most battles are won with words, ideas, and disciplined thinking. What I like about this quote is the idea that a strategic approach to marketing is as important as the communications tactics you engage. I like this military analogy in that no one goes into battle without a strategy. You're not going to send a bunch of soldiers and equipment into battle. Those are your tactics. You're not going to do that without a strategic approach, understanding what your goals are, what you want to accomplish. Same goes in business and in marketing. It's that civilized form of warfare where you need to lay down a strategic plan and understand what you're doing, why you want to do it, and who you want to reach before you jump in, or you're frankly going to waste money. You want to achieve your goals. The entire marketing effort may be a failure unless you understand what you're doing. The nice thing about, I think, what we're talking about today is it's not dependent on budget. People often think that marketing is about advertising. It's about spending a lot of money, throwing a lot of money at the problem to try to make a little bit of money back. What we're talking about here today can be effective whether you have $5 to spend on marketing or $5 million. The key is understanding who you're speaking to, what you want to say, and where you want to say it. That's building up that strategic approach to your marketing efforts. Now, there's an awful lot that I could talk about in terms of marketing strategy, and there's an awful lot that you need to know. We're going to focus on defining your position in your marketplace, but it goes without saying that you need to have a really clear sense of what your business goals are. You need to set marketing goals that are realistic and measurable and that support your business goals. We'll talk a bit about that. You need to identify your target audience pretty specifically in terms of food and beverage processing. There's a lot of competition out there. You need to really understand who your target audience is and how you want to reach them. You need to understand your competitors, absolutely. You need to know who you're competing with so that you can find that niche and really be successful within it. You need to define where you fit within the marketplace relative to your competitors. And this is what we're going to speak about more clearly. You need to understand your brand, and you need to develop concise, accurate, and usable messaging to support your brand. And you need to distribute your message effectively and efficiently, and we'll talk about that as well. Now, I always say, if you're the leader in your company, you can spend hours, you can sit down and spend hours convincing me what sets your product apart, what sets your company apart, why you are the best in your field. You can do that easily. You understand everything about your business, every last little bit of it. That is often sometimes the problem. Can you do that in 10 seconds? Can you convince me in 10 seconds what makes you great? That's what we're going to focus on, is getting to that concise message. That's the core of effective marketing and communications, is really understanding who you are, what you offer to people. And you need to do that quickly and efficiently. People have short attention spans. It doesn't take long for people to lose focus. So, talking about positioning, market positioning. Positioning is very different from advertising. An advertising slogan, an advertising statement may be a fun, interesting way to explain what you're about, what you're trying to achieve, or what your product can offer to people. But positioning is very different from that. It's much more concise. It's much more literal. Positioning is about defining a comfortable niche for your product in the marketplace. This ties back to understanding your competition, understanding the marketplace, understanding your customers, and tying back to your strategic business plan as well. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have marketing and communications tie back to your business plan. All the marketing tactics in the world need to support your business plan. And I'm guessing your primary business goal is to sell more product. If that is your primary goal, then your marketing has to support that. Sounds a little bit strange, but I'll get to that as to how that works. That comfortable niche defining a comfortable niche for your product within the marketplace. A lot of people, when asked, who's your target customer, they'll say everybody. Everyone could be my customer. They could be your customer, but is that really true? It helps to focus your message on a targeted person. There's understanding the marketplace as well. What are the opportunities for you? What are the challenges you may have? What are your strengths that can meet those opportunities? And maybe what are your weaknesses to address those threats that are out there? You need to articulate a key brand message. That's back to that 10-second rule I was talking about. You need to be able to explain what it is that makes you great in 10 seconds. And that, more often than not, is your key brand message. And finally, a good marketing positioning statement. It'll drive all of your marketing communications and your integrated messaging moving forward. So what is a positioning statement? A positioning statement, as you can see on your screen here, can be as simple as, your product / company is the lead in your category that provides your target customer with your key benefit because X, Y, Z. An example here, I tried to come up with a food and beverage processing example, but it's just easier to go to a whole other category to illustrate this. I think you all know Volvo cars. Their positioning statement would likely be, Volvo is the leading safe automotive choice for upscale North American families who demand maximum safety, proven by independent testing. You can see what that statement does there. It carves out their niche as the leading safe automotive choice. They're not going for all car buyers. They're going for people, primarily a targeted consumer base, a targeted customer base, who is looking for a safe choice as their primary consideration. They also throw upscale North American families in there. This would, of course, be a positioning statement for North America. So in terms of a targeted customer, there's geography dropped in there. Upscale right away sets a certain expectation in your customer base. Upscale, you're going to be paying a little bit more, but for that extra cash, you're going to be getting an upscale vehicle. It'll be nicer. It'll have nicer interiors, nicer fittings, that type of thing. It brings a lot of expectations to the forefront, which will help in the purchase. If somebody went to buy a Volvo with an understanding that it's more expensive, there's going to be sticker shock and they're going to run away. It is for families who demand maximum safety, as we said, and the because is because it's been proven by independent testing. They have all of the data to prove that they are indeed a safer choice. So that would be the positioning. And consider that your anchor, the anchor that you move from, because like I say, that articulates a lot of things about who your customer is, who your target customer is, what your key benefits are, what your core essence is, what the fundamental thing is that underpins everything you're trying to do in your business. So we'll move into branding. Now, branding is an interesting question. What is a brand? I've heard many times people say, well, I already have a logo. I have a company name, I have a logo, that's my brand, right? It's true that those elements contribute to your brand, certainly. But as I say here, your brand is the sum total of all impressions that people have about your product or company. All these impressions contribute to what your brand is overall. So that can be your company's name, certainly. It can be your product label. It can be a logo. It can be the text fonts that you use on your packaging tied through to your print ads. It can be the colors that support your logo. It can be your products, certainly, your packaging. Don't forget, your brand is very strongly supported by not only your employees, your sales distributors, but even if you're a one-person company, you are your brand. Everything about you contributes to the impressions that people have about your brand. That rolls through into the communications about how you communicate who you are, what you do, why you do it, and all of that builds into your reputation. Especially a company that has been around for quite some time and is well established, there's a reputation there. And that reputation, more often than not, really is at the core of your brand as well, whether that's quality, consistency, great people, great products, great ingredients, you name it. The key with all of these elements is to be consistent with the way you present all of these elements in the marketplace. in terms of this consistency, ask yourself right now, look at this little chart here on the screen and ask yourself if all of the brand elements that support your brand, all of these different elements here, are they consistent in their appearance and their message in terms of supporting your product, your company, whatever it is that you do. Do these elements consistently contribute to that sum total of the elements that support your brand? So, for example, your logo. Does your logo look the same on your business cards, on your product label, on your company vehicles, on the sign out in front of your production facility? Your website. Does your website look like those things? Your messaging. This is critical. Are the messages that you put out there, whether that's your advertising slogan, whether that's your sales pitches, whether that's the messaging going out to your distributors, is all your written words, do all your written words match the messaging on your website and on your packaging, on your product label? Again, I mentioned delivery truck. Does your delivery truck look like your website? Does your delivery truck look like your logo? That can be pretty important. It sounds like a silly thing, and doing a truck wrap can be expensive for sure. But at the end of the day, if somebody sees your truck on the road, they like your company, and they want to go to your website to find out more about your company, and those things look different from each other, there's a disconnect there. People will potentially not trust you quite as much, not trust your company quite as much, just because those messages aren't aligning. People is critical. The people who either work for your company or work with your company, your partners, your distributors, they need to understand what your company is about, and they need to be saying the same consistent messaging to anyone they're talking to. I always say that, in terms of a clerk working in a store that sells your product is one example. If, they are your sales team often. A customer in the store is going to go up to them and say, hey, what do you know about this product? If they're saying the same thing about your product that you're saying in all other areas, it will contribute to the quality impression and the consistent impression that consumer has about your brand. Packaging goes without saying, along with the product label. It should be consistent. And trade show display, same kind of thing. Now, all of these can be expensive, for sure. If you're a smaller company, just again, rewrapping a truck, changing a sign on the front of your building can be expensive. But it really is essential to have these elements aligned and consistent. Now, in terms of integrated marketing tactics, I said before, strategy is understanding exactly what you're about, where you want to go. Your marketing tactics are the way that you get your message out there. And they can be anything on that list previously that I mentioned, online sales, you name it. I'll get to that in a second. But marketing tactics, you always need to be sure that they reflect your business goals, first and foremost, and support your business goals. The thing about marketing, and this always, one of my pet peeves, frankly, is when you see an advertisement, as one example, where you remember the ad, but you don't remember the product. One example I can give you in the broader scheme of things is the Energizer Bunny. The little bunny for Energizer batteries. Everyone knows the Energizer Bunny, but Energizer continues to be the number 2 battery in the global marketplace. Everyone remembers the bunny. They may even remember the Energizer Bunny, but there's a lot of studies that show people still relate that bunny to Duracell. The advertising is getting awareness of the bunny. It's not getting awareness of the battery, and therefore the battery may not be selling quite as well as it should. Now, who am I to argue with a global advertising campaign? But it's worth reflecting on that. You need to understand your defined customer and competitive activity. You really have to keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. And it's not about keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with what the neighbors are doing, but if your direct competitor is really focusing a significant portion of their budget on advertising, you may need to go back to your business goals and your strategic business plan and analyze that to see if maybe you need to spend a little more in marketing to counter that, or if you need to do something entirely differently. Again, tactics are not just advertising. There's a lot more to it. So I'll get into that in a bit here. Key messages. This is understanding that core essence of your brand, understanding the key elements that will benefit a customer, things that people will get out of buying your product. At the end of the day, any product, I always say, is it's an employee. People are hiring your product to do something in their lives. They're buying your bread because they have a sandwich problem. They need to hire somebody to create that sandwich. Your bread can do that for them. And brand elements, everything we talked about previously, all of those elements that build your brand, all of your marketing tactics need to reflect those, need to understand them, need to incorporate them, and have them be consistent throughout. So, promotion, getting into these marketing tactics. And we're talking about promotion beyond the label. The key point with integrated tactical marketing is that all sales and marketing tools should set the same tone and speak the same language. It's about that recognition. This is what I mean by integrated tactics, is an umbrella of integrated tactics, as you can see here, can include personal selling, your salespeople, one-on-one with a customer. It can include your packaging. It can include public relations, what you say to media, that kind of thing. It can be true promotion, your point of purchase, your point of sale materials. It can be internet marketing, online sales, whether that's your website, social media, anything you're doing there. Or it can be advertising. But at the end of the day, to be truly efficient, and this is what I was saying earlier about whether you're spending $5 or $5 million, the easiest thing that you can do and the most effective thing you can ever do in terms of marketing communications is have everything integrated, saying the same message. You may have heard about the rule of three, where people need to see or hear something 3 times before they really get it, before they really internalize it. There's a lot of studies that say it's more than 3 now because there's so many messages out there. But at the end of the day, if it takes 3 times for somebody to encounter your brand before they start to understand it, accept it, and want to purchase it, then you better make sure that every time they encounter your brand, it looks the same. It speaks the same language, it has the same tone, it has the same visuals. So that's where everything ties through, from personnel selling to packaging to public relations to promotion, internet, advertising. At the end of the day, your salespeople should be saying the same messages that your advertising does. Ideally, that's where you're going to get the most efficiency, the most recognition. It's always a starting point anyway. I mean, advertising, I don't mean to keep going there, but advertising, you have, 10 seconds, like I said before, at the most 30 seconds on a radio or TV ad. But even within that 30 seconds, you only have 10 seconds to really make your point. So you'd better have a concise 10 seconds. It better be accurate, it better be targeted, it better support your business goals, and you should be saying that everywhere. So start with personal selling. This is where you're going to want to have your key messages absolutely locked down. The key things that articulate your strengths, your benefits, what the customer will get out of your product. These key messages must be defined and shared among all stakeholders, anyone who touches your company, the people that may represent your company, your product, or your brand. This is one of the funniest things that I encounter, where people miss this step of sharing the key messages. You are the owner, or you are the head of your company, or you are the marketing communications director. You come up with these great key messages. Everything's locked in place. It sounds great. It's fantastic. It's a perfect articulation of what your company is all about, but you don't tell people about it. You don't share that internally. Internal communications is where all good marketing starts. You need to have everyone in the company and everyone associated with the company buying in to your key messages, understanding it, agreeing with it, and sharing them. Again, your staff or any stakeholders involved with your company are really your best possible sales team. They're the ones who will carry that message out into the world and share it. If they're saying the same thing, it goes back to that rule of 3. The more that message is heard, the more it is consistent, the more they're going to get out of it. Everyone must understand your brand, and they must understand how to share these key messages, how to get them out there, how to say it, how to articulate what it is about your company, your food or beverage products that are truly great. And they need to be able to do it quickly. It's a little tough sometimes. In terms of packaging, not only should your packaging look like all other elements in your brand communications and your brand identity, it must share the same integrated key messages and support your positioning. Sure, there's lots of examples out there, and take a look at your own packaging marketing materials over the years, and ask yourself, do they tend to look the same? Do they share the same visual message, let alone wording? A few examples across the bottom here. This is all the same company, but you can see there's 3 different examples of signage that don't look like each other. None of the signage really looks like the advertising, and none of the advertising really looks like the packaging, the product label. This company has since fixed this, and that's a great thing. But if you are a consumer driving down the road, you see one of these signs. That's great. You may stop at the winery. But there's going to be a disconnect between that and the packaging. On the flip side, if you pass the sign, you're not going to stop in today, but then you see the bottle later. That bottle label isn't going to remind you of the sign. You won't even necessarily connect it to that company initially. So any associations you have made as a potential consumer are lost in when it gets to the stage of packaging. Packaging 9 times out of 10, I mean, POP, point of purchase. If your packaging is the point of purchase, then it really needs to look like all the other messages you've had leading up to that. Any place the consumer has touched your product has to lead up to that moment. At the same token, of course, your packaging has to be great and compelling and articulate enough that if nobody's ever seen you before, but they pick up your package and they're looking at it, you need to be able to somehow make them go, wow, this is great, I need this in my life. That can be the wording on the box or the bottle. It can be the look of it. It can be the photography. It can be anything. These elements don't need to cost you a lot of money, but they need to be compelling, and it's back to that 10 seconds of articulating what it is that makes you great. If somebody picks your package up off the shelf and they've never seen you before, you really need to make sure that that packaging is compelling enough that they're going to want to lay out some money to take that product home. And of course, once they take it home, your product is going to be so great that they're going to love it and they're going to buy it again and again, right? That's the point of it. In terms of public relations is an interesting one. It can actually be one of the most cost-effective marketing tactics going, in that it usually won't take a huge outlay of cash. It does take time, and of course, time is money, and your time is absolutely valuable. But also, depending on how entrepreneurial you are and your stage of business growth, of course, any entrepreneur has all the time in the world. Just why sleep, right? So this is where you get that core message, and you share that message in the most relevant ways with the most targeted people, supporting your positioning. This can be sharing what your company is about at events, with the media. Food shows are an obvious one. But it's back to that trade show or events thing, that you're still only going to have 10 seconds to share your message, to share why you were great. And we all know at a trade show, you can spend all day talking about your product. You probably won't have that amount of time, and more importantly, it's just not efficient. If you're at a busy event, you want to be able to sell people on what it is about you that is compelling quickly, very accurately, and you want to have it ladder back to everything else you've done. In terms of promotion, like I said before, your promotional elements must look like all other elements of your brand communications. It especially has to look like your packaging. Sounds obvious, but if you may find this with your own company. If not, you know many examples where point of purchase items, point of sale items don't look like the package, for starters. They don't share the key messages. Oftentimes, the worst case is where it won't even connect through to the product it's supporting. A point of sale incentive, it may be nice to say, buy this beverage and win a free trip to Florida. That would be great if the beverage were orange juice. It may not make as much sense if it is some sort of seltzer, for example. You'd be better off finding a trip to X that matches your brand. This is where it comes down to promotion having to accurately support your positioning and your business goals. Your positioning, that niche you're in, who your target customer is, what you want to get, what you want them to get out of the interaction with you, and your business goals as well. That's the key in terms of promotion. Have everything integrated, everything tying back. Now, internet marketing. Internet marketing is a much larger question. The good thing about internet marketing, very much the same as public relations, is it can take a lot of time, but it is fairly efficient and it has a very broad reach. Pretty much everyone is online these days. Increasingly, more and more people are getting their information and their marketing messages, their advertising messages through online sources. That can be internet, that can be email marketing, that can be social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest is a fairly new one, which for food and beverage processing you might be really interested in. Pinterest.com. It's a means of sharing pictures, images, recipes quite broadly with a very broad audience. People can approve of your elements, share them, that kind of thing. But the key with any online messaging, so again, email marketing, web marketing, social media, the first thing is that you will be best served if your messaging is relevant and targeted. Talking about a product that has no relevance to someone, not only will you not break through the clutter to get your message through to them, but you may actually kind of bother them a little bit. We've all received email blasts from something that we had no interest in whatsoever. What was your reaction to that? If you received an email marketing thing that you didn't care about, not only do you delete it immediately, but you probably grumble about it a little bit. You're not that happy with it. You're not going to share that message broadly. And in fact, if you encounter that product again and remember that you received this irrelevant email blast about it, you're going to be fundamentally negative towards it. Marketing and promotion and internet marketing in general can be very much like an introduction in a big party. You're in a big room, you're at the party, and someone introduces you to someone else and says, "Hello, this is X. I think you should get to know them a bit better." And you can shake your hand. Well, whatever comes out of your mouth better be compelling enough to keep the conversation going. If you turn somebody away at that first encounter, not only will they not want to talk to you, but they may try to actively avoid you for the rest of the party. You don't want to do that. That's where you need to support your overall positioning, is understanding who you're speaking to and understand what you want to say to them. Now, advertising. Advertising is a big thing. It can be a huge thing. It can be extremely costly to engage. And it just simply has to be well done. It has to be targeted. It has to be saying the precise messages you want it to say, if only because of the cost and the reach as well. Advertising has to be relevant. It has to be targeted. It has to be branded. This is key. It has to make sense within the context of your brand. All of those other elements that support what your brand is. Advertising has to scream that. It has to be supportive of your positioning in the market. And most importantly, any advertising has to be a call to action. It has to get that consumer, that viewer, that listener, whatever it is, to want to buy your product. That ties back to your business goals, and that all marketing has to support your business goals. Your business goal is to sell more product. It's not to do a great advertisement. It's not even to do a great package. The great packaging is the tactic you use to support your strategic goal of selling more stuff. Advertising is the same thing. And there's lots of examples out there. The one example in terms of beverage processing that I speak about a lot is the Molson Canadian had the I Am Canadian rant. You may remember this. This is about the year 2000, where they had the rant, the Joe Canadian, I Am Canadian. Everyone knew about the ad. It won a ton of awards. But did it sell more Molson Canadian beer? It really didn't. Everyone talked about the ad. No one talked about the product. And the ad itself didn't actually say, "Go buy Molson Canadian because I am Canadian." It just said, "I am Canadian." Built a great case for what it is like to be a strong nationalist and everything else, but it didn't have that call to action. And so at the end of the day, all of the money they spent on that campaign, and if you remember the campaign, you can only imagine how much that would have cost. My understanding is that it didn't necessarily move the level of product they needed it to do to support those business goals. Long term, you could talk about how it did build relevance for the company and the brand, absolutely. And that is important. But at the end of the day, you need that call to action as well. So how do you get to your core message? How do you develop this essence message? The key to get there is you need to consider the core consumer benefits of what you offer, what your company offers. So this is your product. What are the core benefits behind your product? What are the core benefits that your target consumer is going to get out of buying and consuming your product? You need to think about pricing. This can tie back to perceptions. Are you a premium brand? Are you a value brand? Are you a commodity price? Are you super premium? Pricing can absolutely affect everything else in terms of your brand positioning. Distribution, where do you sell your product? Are you a direct-to-consumer through your website? Do you go through third-party retailers? If so, a third-party retailer, they are not only your customer, your primary customer, but they're also your primary target for communications to get them on board with what it is that you do. Communications and promotion. What do the consumers get out of your communications? What do they get out of your promotions? What is the message that supports those? Again, is a trip to Florida going to support the benefits that go into your brand? Your people. What are your people offering? What is your returns policy? As one example. And finally, I mean, talk about personality. There's an old adage about the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, placement, all of these types of things: product, pricing, distribution, promotion. But the other 2 P's I say are people and personality. Your product has a personality. Your company has a personality. It absolutely does. A lot of people forget about that. Your personality is that thing, if articulated, that will make people want to be more involved with you. They'll want your product to be a part of their lives in a way that connects emotionally. I mean, the best advertising, people always say, should have an emotional connection, draw something out of your heartstrings. And that's a big part of the personality. Are you warm and bubbly? I mean, by you, I mean your company, your product. Is it a warm and bubbly product? Is it fun? Is it very functional? You need to articulate those things quite clearly. So does each impression about your business, all of these things that you put out there, does each impression about your business and your brand, do they answer these questions? And again, these are all leading towards developing this essence around your company and about your brand, getting to the core message behind your brand. So if you're trying to determine who your core audience is, for example, who will gain value from your products? That's a fairly simple question to ask, to just get to the core of who your target audience may be. Who's going to gain value from your products? At the very least, asking that question will help you to segment out the people who are not your target customer. What is your brand known for? If you've been around for a while, what are you known for? Are you known for being the best product in your segment? Are you known for being the best priced product in your segment? What makes you different or unique from your competitors? What are those things that people look to? Again, what are you known for? What makes you different? What makes you unique? And finally, does your brand promise what your products deliver? This is a big part of the strategic marketing piece, is if everything about your marketing position promises one thing and your product doesn't in fact deliver that, then you're sunk. You may sell a couple of products to a couple of consumers, but if there's a disconnect at that final stage, you're going to lose that customer in the long term. That's why everything ties back to your strategic business plan, understanding very clearly what it is that your product delivers, and then finding a way to articulate that in your brand promise. It all starts with that product. It all starts with your business goals and leads up to the brand promise. Now, sorry, just going back a few slides, we just have a question coming in here from Maureen Sykes. going back to advertising and having a call to action. Now she asks, what is a good example of a call to action? A call to action could very simply, calls to action are hard to do without being cheesy, but a simple call to action is simply like, buy this product the next time you are at XYZ store. The bottom line is that, any kind of sales process, anyone who's ever done street level sales will know that the hardest thing to do is to close the sale. You can spend all of the sales meeting discussing the product features, attributes, benefits, all of those things, but at the end of the sales call, you need to ask for the sale. You need to say, would you like to buy this? If you would like to buy this, this is how you can do so. At the most basic level, that's the call to action. That you need to have that incorporated into your personal selling, into your advertising. You need to be able to close the deal, ask for the sale, and it's almost as simple as that. Make the ask. Maureen, write in if that doesn't completely answer your question, and I'll try to be a little more clear with that. So in the interest of time, I'll keep moving on. The overall point of this presentation is that branding is about much more than just the product label, much more than your logo, much more than your slogan. It involves your market positioning and your key messages. So the best thing you can do, and go back to all of these things we've talked about, your product attributes, your pricing, your distribution, the people supporting your company, the personality of your company, of your brand, your communications. Decide 5 things. It doesn't need to be 5 things, but at least 5 things, and make a list of them if you can. The 5 things that you need people to know about your company and your product. And each of those 5 things, you need to be able to say it in just 10 seconds. So that can be, my company is the absolute best premium soda water company in Ontario. That can be one. It can be, my company is the best halal meat supplier and the only halal meat supplier in southwestern Ontario that meets all the standards that halal meats need to meet. That's a pretty straightforward statement. You can say it in under 10 seconds. So 5 things. And again, think about your product, your pricing, distribution, your people, your personality. Come down with a list of 5 things that you can say about your company in just 10 seconds. When you have that list and you have that marketing positioning statement that I mentioned earlier, you're going to be really close to the essence of your brand, the essence of what you offer. And from there, you can build all of your promotions, your sales speeches, your advertising, all of those things can build from that. These things have to be consistent. And the key here, and I can't say this enough, is that whatever you say about your company, about your products, about your brand, you need to say the same thing, you need to say it the same way, and you need to say it everywhere. I can't stress that enough. Because your message has to be consistent to build that trust, that consumer trust and that relevance. People need to recognize who you are, they need to recognize you when they see you, and they need to trust you. And that trust is built from these repeat engagements with a consistent message. And finally, in terms of the third point, integrated campaigns and communications. All of your branding and marketing activities need to be part of a consistent, integrated approach using multiple tools. You really shouldn't use just one tool to get your message out. You need to be doing all of these different things. I mean, sales tactics, of course, are essential, but they need to tie through to your signage, your vehicles. Advertising, I've said, it's expensive, and it isn't for everyone by any means, and in fact, it may not be necessary for what you're doing. That's an important part of your strategic business plan, is understanding what percentage of resources you want to dedicate to marketing, and if you simply can't afford advertising, you don't need to do it. If that's not in your business plan, then don't do it. But understand that all of these other elements are still essential. Getting a clear, concise message, stating it in every opportunity that you have to say it, and say it consistently, say it everywhere. All of these approaches, having them being integrated using multiple tools, are the best way to ensure that your brand is spread out as cleanly and consistently as possible and beyond the label. Now, we have a comment coming in here from Jennifer. She said, to your comment of a call to action, buy now. As a marketer, they're creating short-term sales and not long-term customers. That's true. So this is back to what I was saying about personality, is the buy now, that is definitely a very short-term thing. A part of articulating the message that you want to get out there is understanding the personality of your brand and making it compelling. Thanks, Jennifer, for that. That's a good point. Is articulating the personality of your brand in a way that's more than just a commodity purchase. If your product is compelling and interesting, lovable, that's okay, that's a bit of a cheesy word. But if it's compelling and interesting and people want to be a part of it, that will not only support short-term sales, but a long-term customer relationship as well. That's a tough thing to do, but it is the key to getting to that articulation. That is a personality kind of articulation, is really understanding the core benefits of not just what you do, what your customer is looking for, what they want to get out of the relationship. And Jennifer just says, an idea being, for example, Apple. They have great branding and everyone understands who they are. What is the call to action in their advertisements? I'd say the call to action in their advertisements, Apple is fairly subtle. I assume you're talking about Apple computers, not Apple the fruit. The call to action in their advertisements, I think, is that you will be fundamentally cooler if you buy Apple products, that you need to be a part of this. You get that sense out of their ads. And having a market leadership stance, they can get away with that. In buying Apple products, your life will be better. It's not a forefront call to action, but it is something that everything in their brand supports. They're known for being premium level products. They're known for having fantastic, a brand promise that is fully supported by the products they have. They can get away with saying that your life will be better with Apple products because they have an army of supporters out there who will tell you that if you give them a moment. Talk about their messaging being integrated across the board. Perhaps maybe not so much in the past few years, but Apple users, you remember from 5-10 years ago, were almost militant in their support of the Apple brand. So that's a good point, is they don't have an obvious call to action in their ads in a way that a lot of the competitors do. But as the market leader, they may not necessarily need that overt call to action. The competitors may as well. Excuse the microwave beeping outside, by the way. Any other questions? I see the cursor moving around. Oh, Maureen Sykes has a question here. Maureen asks, does it make sense for a company to establish formal or a regular review of brand positioning, key messages, etc., to ensure they stay on target? In other words, it's not a one-time effort. I'm so glad Maureen asked this question because the answer is unequivocally yes. This is reviewing your marketing practices, your branding practices, positioning, key messages, all of those things is definitely something you want to do simply because your business evolves greatly over time. And this can be whether you're a startup or whether you've been around for 50 years. Your target consumer is always shifting. More importantly, the competitive set is always shifting. Your competitors are always doing different things. They're always trying to get a bigger share of business as well. They're trying to do it at your expense. So at the very least, a formal review of brand positioning, key messages, is essential just to keep an eye on what the competitive set is doing. I can't tell you how many times I've seen examples of a company where they change little things over time. I had that example earlier about saying the same thing everywhere, where a company will change their logo, their company logo. And that's great, but they don't set aside the budget in their business plan to redo the sign, to redo the vehicles. It was back to that kind of thing. So suddenly you have a new logo that's being used in a new advertisement, but the packaging, as a horrible example, still has an old logo on it. Suddenly all of that effort and expense in putting that new look out there isn't speaking to the old elements. But more importantly, just from the core point of view of your strategy, before you even get into tactics, doing a review of your brand, a review of your positioning, and to review your business plan. I mean, this all starts with business planning, right? You need to understand who your distributors are, who your customers are, where they're shopping, why they're shopping there, what people like about you, what the competitors are doing, get all of this information together, and push that forward into your forward-facing marketing. And again, integrating it. It's no small feat, but it is absolutely worth putting a review of all of your marketing efforts in at least as frequently as you review your business plan, and benchmark against that too. I mean, measure these things. Measure the success. That can be as simple as polling your customers, polling your distributors, getting a sense of how they feel about what it is you're doing. Is what you are doing as successful as it can be? We're also busy just doing our day-to-day things, so we often don't stop to reflect on the success or failure of past efforts, not just in marketing, of course, in everything. It really is important to have that review, have it written into your planning cycle, to look back on what you've done and make course corrections as you need to. To have your efforts be a one-time effort, they'll work for a while, but boy, as the market shifts, it will shift. Quite possibly, it will shift away from you, and if that's the case, then you're going to be in trouble. So you need to keep an eye on that. Thanks for that question, Maureen. And Stephanie has a question. She says, do you recommend getting feedback from customers or clients regarding your branding, or should those be things to manage on your own? Again, awesome question, Stephanie. Like I just said, yeah, you definitely want to solicit feedback from customers and clients. I mean, the fact is, you say, should these things to manage on your own? It's always going to be down to your decision anyway, but getting feedback from customers and clients, even if what they say strikes you as fundamentally irrelevant, not valid, it's still important to know, and it's very important to solicit that information, because, hey, if they give you one chestnut that makes a difference to everything you're doing, you need that outside feedback. This is my personal view, but I really believe that no one has all the answers. And again, you understand everything about your company, and you understand every little nuance, but you understand every little nuance right now as you see it, and everyone's different. Your customers, your clients are going to have different views on those elements, and short answer is yes, getting feedback from your customers and clients is a great idea. Do we have any other questions? Nope, that's it. We still have a few more minutes. If you want to, if you have any more questions to send in, please do. In the meantime, I'll talk about feedback. I'll go into that question a little bit more as to how you may go about getting feedback. We mentioned internet marketing. Internet marketing, social media is one example, is a great way to have a one-on-one relationship with customers, with your consumers. So, for example, you can have a blog, or a news section. You can be posting news about your company, about your product, and there's opportunities for questions, comments on those boards. Anyone who's on Facebook knows that you can get all sorts of comments, for good or for bad. Twitter, if you're putting information about your company or your brand out there on Twitter, people will always comment, make suggestions on that. Social media, being the example here, is a great way to ask questions. Social media, fundamentally, the way it's designed is not to broadcast information. It's about to share information and to solicit feedback. So that can be as simple as putting a post on Twitter, if it's appropriate for your company, saying, let us know what you think about what we're doing right now, whatever that may be. Another question coming in here from Kelly Albright. What frequency do you recommend a complete overhaul of your brand? Complete overhaul is a tough one. simply because if the feedback you're getting from your customers or your clients is that your brand still rings relevant, everything about it is still very relevant, you may not need a complete overhaul. So I would recommend doing a complete analysis of your brand really annually, certainly no more than every 3 years. Just to really review, where you were, what your business plan was a year ago or 3 years ago, where you are now, and how things have shifted. Is your business significantly larger than it was? Is your target customer base from 1 year, 3 years ago, are they drifting away? Are they coming in? Are they growing? Is that contracting? And then ask yourself if your brand is still doing the job it needs to do. Are those elements still speaking the same language, or are they starting to disconnect with your target customer? An example, a really obvious example, is when Coca-Cola launched New Coke, and I guess that was the mid '80s. That was not only a complete overhaul of their brand, that was a complete overhaul of everything they ever were in terms of the product. But the one thing they didn't do was change their fundamental logo and their coloring, right? The very basic things. Sometimes there's a disconnect. What do you mean it's New Coke, but it still looks the same? That was obviously a complete flop, although my personal theory, if anyone can answer this question for me, I'd love to know. My theory is that they knew all along they were going to launch Coke Classic and keep New Coke. That's another thing. In terms of the frequency of recommending a complete overhaul of your brand, keep an eye on what you're doing. If it's working for you, and if it's working strategically, you may not need to change a thing for decades. If it's getting to the point where you think your customer feedback, your client feedback, is that your brand, your product is a little bit stale, it's getting a little bit irrelevant, it's not connecting with people emotionally anymore, people simply don't want to buy it, people see a competitor's product as more interesting, more relevant, then that may be the time to do a moderate overhaul, a complete overhaul. Everything, it totally depends. No rule of thumb as to, every 5 years redo it entirely. None of that. But annually, at least, I'd say, just do a check. Do a check on where you have come, where you are right now, where you were, and just make sure that everything is aligning according to your goals, according to your strategic goals. Okay, question from Stephanie here. Is a slogan necessary or helpful? Could act as a call to action, perhaps. Also, is permission marketing a better way to go than launching ads in local newspapers and magazines? I guess there's two questions here. A slogan isn't necessary, but it's definitely helpful as an articulation of those benefits, of your core essence. The biggest thing is, and I mentioned this before, is that a positioning statement, as we discussed, is not advertising. It's not a slogan. In fact, positioning statements are a fairly boring read. It's a statement of fact. It's not a compelling thing like a slogan is. A slogan is a good way to get your personality across, right? Your brand personality. And Stephanie's absolutely right. That can be a fantastic call to action. I mentioned Coca-Cola a minute ago. Coke, their slogan going back 100 years is enjoy Coke. That's a call to action. That's telling you, enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it. That works on about 3 different levels, but that's a call to action. Great slogan. I guess that's why they're Coke now. Permission marketing, talking about a better way to go than launching ads in local newspapers and magazines. There's no better way. Again, it comes down to what you are about. Ads, even in local newspapers or local magazines, can be expensive. Permission marketing, I'm assuming you're talking about social media marketing, opt-in marketing, email marketing is one example where people say, yes, you can send me messages, that's going to be great. The good thing about that is it takes time, it takes effort, but it's otherwise fundamentally no cost. I'd recommend, in an ideal world, if it matches your brand, you do a bit of both. You get the message out in multiple channels. The bottom line with any one channel of advertising or marketing is you're not hitting as many people as you could. Local newspapers and magazines reach a certain segment. Emails will reach a different group of people. A Facebook page or a Twitter feed will reach an altogether different group of people. You may reach the same person with all 3 different avenues And that's okay, because that's repetition, right? That's getting your brand in front of them more and more and more, and hopefully building that trust with them, hopefully building a relationship with them, as long as what you were saying is relevant to them. That's the key in terms of whatever you do. Make sure it's relevant to your brand, and that it's that is relevant to your business plan, that you have the funds in place and the human resources, let's not forget that, in place to follow through and do what you need to do to get your message out there. Any other questions? Stephanie, I hope that's what you meant by permission marketing. If I got that wrong, let us know right now. And I hope I answered it. Oh, okay. So I guess Stephanie just sent in. I guess I got that correctly. Well, folks, how are we for time? I think that's. Oh, sorry, one more. Okay, yes. Stephanie asked, will this webinar be available to watch or stream again? That is absolutely true. This information will be available. If you go to managingforsuccess.ca, you'll be able to find all sorts of information, both about this presentation, about where to find it again. So that's managingforsuccess.ca. A resource guide on this topic will also be launched in late summer, talking about marketing in general for Ontario food and beverage processors. And, Kelly writes, yeah, absolutely. Kelly says, in terms of consistency in your brand, I often feel that saying the same thing everywhere gets boring. I struggle with coming up with new ways of saying the same thing in a different way, but at the same time being consistent. You know what, Kelly, you're absolutely right. The biggest challenge is in finding new ways to say a core, consistent message. It can be very hard. And you are right that saying the same thing everywhere can get boring. The one good thing, the example I mentioned before about saying the same thing in an ad and in social media and somewhere else is, I always say that human beings are we're deletion creatures. We're always getting information from all different places, through our eyes, through our ears, through reading, through everything. And if we cross something that we've already seen, that we're already familiar with, on a conscious level or a subconscious level, really, we just tend to go, okay, I know that already, and you move on to the next piece of information. But it still registers that you saw it. So I agree from the holder of the brand's point of view. You may feel that you're being boring by having that same message everywhere all the time. But it may not be as boring to your target consumer simply because they're not seeing you all the time. They're not seeing you every minute of every day. In fact, they may only come across you once a month. So if there is that same message all the time, that's not a bad thing, because you're repeating that message and you're burning it into their brain a little bit better. You say you struggle with coming up with new ways to say the same thing in a different way, but at the same time being consistent. That is the biggest challenge in this whole process. And all I can really say to that is to really have a close understanding of everything that you are about, everything your company is about, everything you represent, your product, your core personality, the core essence of your brand. And at least if you have that right, then get into the interesting ways to say that will hopefully come a little bit more easily. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. Well, folks, I think that we're out of time. If you do have any further questions, I know this is potentially a lot of information to dump on you in only 1 hour. If you think of any questions, please forward them through to the managingforsuccess.ca website. We will be compiling a list of these questions and making them available to you if you need more answers. And again, there's a resource guide that is going to be available in late summer, specifically about marketing and communications for Ontario food and beverage processors. So again, my name is Rob McLean. Thank you very much for joining us. And again, go to managingforsuccess.ca for more information. Thanks and have a great day.